Hey, thanks for taking just a few minutes to watch this brief description of the How to Be Rich campaign kit. The How to Be Rich journey began for me several years ago when I was preparing a message series on stewardship for all of our churches. While I was studying, I ran across what the Apostle Paul said to Timothy, a passage I bet you have read 100 times, but on this particular occasion, it jumped out at me in a new way. Here's what he writes. He said, "Command those who are rich in this present world." And then he goes on from there to tell rich people how to be good at being rich. Now, when I read that, I thought maybe what you think when you read a passage like that. I thought, I can skip this because I'm not rich, and the folks in my church certainly don't think that they're rich, so this doesn't apply to me, and they're not going to think it applies to them. Rich is that other guy. Rich is that other family. But then I got to thinking, like you, I have been to some places in the world where I was the rich guy. Like you, I have visited places where I felt very rich in this present world. And then, just like you, I came back home, shook it off, and got back to comparing myself to the people who had more than I did. You know, the really rich people. So I decided that instead of skipping these verses, I was going to teach them to our congregation. After all, as I just illustrated, compared to some people, some of us are in fact rich in this present world. But, and this may come as a surprise, it certainly did to me, compared to most people, many of us are rich in this present world. And here's why I say that. During my research for this series, I discovered that if you make $48,000 a year, $48,000 a year, you are in the top 1% of the wage earners in the world. Think about that. The top 1%. In other words, if you make over $48,000 a year, you are in fact rich in this present world. So for 4 weekends, I taught through 1 Timothy 6, 17 and 18. I spent the first week convincing our churches that they were in fact rich, whether they felt like it or not, which is a big part of the problem. And then I told them, since you're rich, you need to be good at it. And it was the learning to be good at it part that comprised the lion's share of the message series. Well, that core message of Be Rich actually became an annual message for our churches, and that annual message eventually became an annual giving campaign for our churches. As part of our learning to be rich, we take an annual Be Rich offering at the end of the Be Rich message that goes to support local charities, some faith-based, but many that are not. In the months leading up to Be Rich Sunday, we send our staff out into the community to find the organizations that are, knocking it out of the park in terms of serving those in need in our local communities. We find out what those organizations need, and then in the weeks following the Be Rich weekend, we show up at those organizations' door with a check and a video camera to capture the moment and to give these charities an opportunity to thank our local congregations, which of course encourages their generosity. We encourage our folks, this is so interesting, we encourage our folks to actually invite guests for this annual collection, and here's why. As you know, unchurched people often make an incorrect assumption about a local church and the way it manages its money. Be Rich is the perfect opportunity for people outside the church to see that we want something for our communities, not simply from our communities. Because in our case, 100% of what comes in that offering goes right back out into the local community. And because of the size of our churches, in our case, that is millions of dollars. Now, to be honest, most of my passion around the Be Rich initiative stems from my belief that the reputation of the local church in a community should be something along the lines of, those are the most generous, compassionate, selfless people I've ever met. Not sure I believe everything they believe. Not sure I'd want to be a part of what they do, but I sure am glad they're in our community. I sure am glad that church is in my neighborhood. As you know, generosity and compassion were the hallmarks of the first century church. That was the only leverage early Christians had. But it was enough to capture the attention of the entire pagan world. And I'm convinced, and I bet you are as well, I'm convinced unconditional generosity continues to be the church's best leverage point for pointing people in the direction of the unconditional love of God through Christ. Now, chances are you're already doing something similar in your community through your church. But I also know that if you're like me, you're always looking for new ways to make the timeless message of generosity even more irresistible. Be Rich is simply a new approach, a new angle to demonstrate your church's concern for those in your local community. The Be Rich Kit contains several things. It contains the 4 messages that I preached several years ago that I have repeated since then, along with the outlines and the transcripts. It includes all of our key art, a copy of my new book, How to Be Rich, a 4-part group series that you can do while you're doing the series, as well as our Be Rich playbook that we designed for churches who want to do a Be Rich campaign. It includes all the instructions, everything you need for conducting a successful Be Rich initiative in your community through your local church. So I really hope you'll consider conducting a Be Rich campaign in your church. The dozen or so churches that we have asked to pilot this project with us had such a positive experience that all of them, 100% of them, are planning to make this an annual campaign in their churches for the foreseeable future. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for considering. And regardless of what you decide to do in terms of Be Rich, I hope that you as a church leader and your local church will continue to look for opportunities to teach your congregation to do good and be rich in good deeds. Thanks so much for listening. God bless.